No one saw this coming. Jacob Fatu just shook the foundation of WWE by teaming up with DREW McIntyre? Yeah. You heard that right. Jacob Fatu was always the lone wolf. Bloodline ties? Complicated. Trust? Earned in war, not family dinners. Meanwhile, Drew? A beast forged in betrayal, clawing back after the sword was yanked from under him. Backstage, cameras caught what fans missed, Fatu and Drew locking eyes, nodding like two men with the same scars. They weren't just plotting a comeback. They were declaring war. On solo Sikoa. On the entire New Age bloodline. And just when you thought it couldn't get crazier, Jacob Fatu whispered, "I don't fight with family, I fight for respect." What's their next move? Hit subscribe, because when this war explodes, you'll want front row seats. It wasn't shouted by a commentator or whispered in a backstage leak. It was carved across the screen of every fan's phone in bold headlines, urgent YouTube titles, and explosive tweets. Within hours, it wasn't just a rumor, it was gospel. Jacob Fatu, the enforcer, the untamed beast, the bloodline's black sheep, was spotted backstage locking eyes with DREW McIntyre, not in rivalry, not in tension, but in recognition. The two stood silently. No words. Just a nod. A gesture that said everything. Seconds later, Fatu turned to a nearby mic, leaned in, and calmly said 6 words that echoed across the wrestling world: "I don't fight with family. I fight for respect." And just like that, the new era of chaos began. Let's back up for a moment. Rewind the tape. It was supposed to be a normal Friday night. The kind of night where stories simmer, rivalries advance, and fans debate who deserves a push. But backstage, away from the flashing lights and rehearsed promos, something was building. Something primal. Security footage later revealed what the live audience never saw: DREW McIntyre, alone, pacing in the hallway near Gorilla. His face was a mix of battle scars and quiet fury, the look of a man who had given everything to this business and had it torn away time and time again. He wasn't dressed to fight. No war paint, no sword, no spotlight. Just quiet steps echoing in an empty hall. That's when the door creaked open behind him. Not stormed. Not kicked. Walked. Calm. Confident. Controlled. And if you know anything about Jacob Fatu, that's when he's most dangerous, when he's thinking, not swinging. Drew turned. They stared at each other. There were no fists thrown. No trash talk. Just a slow, deliberate nod. Not the kind you give to a friend. The kind you give to a soldier, a survivor who's seen the same war as you. Let's be clear, this was not supposed to happen. On paper, these two should never align. DREW McIntyre, the chosen one turned outcast, who rebuilt himself from nothing after being discarded by WWE. He fought his way back to the top through grit, brutality, and unshakable self-belief. But recently? He's been alone. Betrayed. Pushed aside for flashier stars, younger talent, and family dynasties. Jacob Fatu, a man born into the legendary Anoa'i dynasty, cousins with Roman Reigns, brother to the Usos, and a name whispered in fear across the independent circuit. But unlike his blood brothers, Jacob never wore the gold chains or soaked in the spotlight. He was the one who didn't play the game. Too dangerous. Too real. Too unpredictable. Their stories run parallel. But also in opposite directions. Drew's the rejected hero. Fatu's the outlaw never invited to the table. But there's one thing they share: they've both been left behind. By management. By family. By loyalty itself. This wasn't a spontaneous decision. No way. This was a slow burn, the kind of alliance that starts in silence and ends in violence. In the weeks leading up to that backstage encounter, subtle signals were missed by nearly everyone. Fatu's promos shifted. He spoke less about family pride and more about respect earned in blood. Drew stopped addressing the audience. He started looking directly into the camera, like he wasn't talking to fans anymore, but to someone. At Clash in Cardiff, Fatu was seen watching Drew's match from the shadows, unnoticed until eagle-eyed fans found him in the background freeze frames. WWE didn't script this moment. This wasn't a heel turn, a babyface push, or a last-minute rewrite. This was organic warfare, and the fuse had already been lit. Meanwhile, Solo Sikoa has been rebuilding the bloodline from ashes. With Roman Reigns absent from TV and Jimmy and Jay at odds, Solo became the last stone pillar holding the dynasty together. He's not flashy. He doesn't cut 10-minute monologues. But his presence is nuclear, silent but explosive. He's brought in mercenaries. Reinforced the brand. Turned the bloodline from a royal family into a crime syndicate. And now, he's got two major problems. Fatu isn't with him. Fatu is now standing next to DREW McIntyre. This isn't a defection. This is a declaration of war. Fatu isn't trying to rejoin the bloodline. He's here to burn it down. When Fatu said, "I don't fight with family. I fight for respect," he wasn't rejecting his blood. He was dismantling the illusion that family loyalty means anything in WWE. Because here's the truth, Jey Uso walked away. Jimmy Uso flipped then folded. Roman disappeared. Solo? He's trying to hold it together with duct tape and intimidation. And Fatu? He watched it all from the sidelines, the outsider who was always told he was too dangerous to be included. Now he's writing his own narrative. One where loyalty isn't bought. Where respect isn't inherited. It's earned in war. And who better to fight beside him than DREW McIntyre, a man whose loyalty got him nothing but scars. The reaction was instantaneous. Twitter exploded. YouTube flooded with live breakdowns. No way this is real. Drew and Fatu just broke wrestling. The bloodline is officially finished. Even the wrestlers backstage were reportedly stunned. Multiple reports surfaced that TripleH had to tighten security around the angle because they wanted zero leaks. This wasn't just a storyline. This was the new arc of WWE's future. Veterans weighed in. Booker T, Jacob Fatu might be the missing piece the bloodline was always afraid of. Kevin Nash, Drew needed this. He's been aimless. Now he's got a reason to kill. So now the question looms like thunder over the arena, what is their next move? This alliance wasn't formed for a tag match. This wasn't a handshake over mutual enemies. This is a strategic war pact, built not on friendship, but on necessity. Two men. Both betrayed. Both battle-tested. Both done with talking. And the target? Solo Sikoa. The entire New Age bloodline. The myth of family. This isn't just a feud. It's a reckoning. And the first blow? Hasn't even been struck yet. Before Jacob Fatu was a name whispered in wrestling locker rooms with equal parts respect and fear, he was a problem child. Not just in the literal sense, but in the way only someone born into greatness can be seen as a threat to it. He's from the Inoue family, a bloodline so entrenched in wrestling royalty it's practically its own federation. Roman Reigns. The Usos. The Wild Samoans. Yokozuna. Rikishi. Legends. Champions. Headliners. Jacob was born into the system, but the system never quite knew what to do with him. Growing up in that family meant expectations were baked into his DNA. You didn't just wrestle. You carried a legacy on your back. You walked into rooms where people already expected you to act like a star, talk like a star, and perform like a main eventer, even if you hadn't laced your boots yet. But Jacob wasn't polished. He wasn't playing for the cameras. He had real-life scars long before he got ring gear. His early life was marked by run-ins with the law, troubled behavior, and a long list of warnings from coaches who couldn't figure out how to contain his potential without getting hurt by it. WWE took one look and passed. He was too volatile. Too raw. Too much of a risk. So Jacob did what few others in his family had to do. He went to the independents and built his own legend the hard way. In MLW, he wasn't just a top draw. He was a force of nature. Fans didn't chant for him. They braced for him. Every match was a brawl. Every promo felt like a threat. He wasn't acting, he was surviving. But even as he climbed ranks, collected titles, and made headlines, the shadow of the Bloodline loomed. He wasn't at WrestleMania. He wasn't standing next to Roman Reigns in championship poses. He was the cousin they didn't talk about. The ghost. Jacob never said it publicly, but everyone could feel it. He didn't just want respect. He wanted acknowledgement. Something Roman had turned into a catchphrase but never offered to Fatu. Not once. So Jacob stopped waiting. He didn't need an invitation to the table. He brought a sledgehammer instead. Drew McIntyre's story is the cautionary tale of what happens when you believe your own hype, only to be left behind the moment you stumble. He was once labeled the chosen one by Vince McMahon himself. That phrase stuck to Drew like a branding iron, gift and curse in equal measure. Everyone saw him as a future world champion. But instead of a rocket strapped to his back, he got buried under gimmicks and mid-card purgatory. When the company had no use for him, they tossed him. Just like that. But Drew didn't disappear. He went back to the independents, rebuilt his body, refined his style, and relearned what WWE had made him forget: how to fight with something real to prove. When he returned, he came back better. Stronger. Angrier. He won the WWE Championship during the pandemic, in an empty arena, with no fans to witness his crowning. He carried the company during its darkest hours, but the moment crowds returned, the spotlight shifted elsewhere. Roman Reigns. Cody Rhodes. Gunther. All rising. All pushed. And Drew? Still waiting for someone to remember what he'd already proven. He didn't complain. Not at first. He played the company man. Did the media tours. Put over younger guys. But the resentment started to grow. Not because he wasn't winning titles, but because he wasn't being seen. And then came the betrayals. He tried to trust Sheamus. That fell apart. He tried to play the good guy against Karrion Kross. That blew up in his face. He tried to stay civil with Seth Rollins. That went nowhere. Each failed alliance hardened him. Every handshake turned sour. By the time 2024 rolled around, Drew was done making friends. He stopped smiling during promos. He started swinging harder. You could see it in his matches: less choreography, more chaos. The crowd still popped, but there was an edge in his voice now. He wasn't here to entertain. He was here to remind people he should have never been forgotten. So when Jacob Fatu appeared in that hallway, Drew didn't hesitate. He recognized the fire in Fatu's eyes because he saw it in his own reflection. Solo Sikoa's rise. Solo Sikoa was never meant to be the face of the Bloodline. He was the cleanup hitter, the enforcer, the silent hammer standing behind Roman Reigns during promos, arms crossed, eyes scanning for threats. But when Roman's appearances slowed and the Usos fractured, Solo was the only one left standing. He didn't ask for leadership, but WWE needed a face to keep the Bloodline alive, and Solo stepped into the role with cold calculation. He didn't need words. He had presence. Solo started pulling in new allies. Tama Tonga, Hikuleo, and even whispers of Jacob Fatu at one point. He rebuilt the brand as less a family, more a militia. The new Bloodline wasn't about legacy anymore, it was about control. But Solo made one miscalculation: he thought Jacob Fatu would fall in line. He didn't understand that while Jacob shared blood with him, he didn't share values. Solo thought titles and power were the goals. Jacob wanted something deeper, something earned, not inherited. When Solo didn't give him that, Jacob backed off. Quietly. Calmly. But not because he was walking away. Because he was planning something else. Solo's rise wasn't built on trust. It was built on fear. And fear works, until someone shows up who doesn't feel it. That's Jacob Fatu. That's DREW McIntyre. And that's the war Solo never saw coming. Seeds of rebellion. There were signs. Subtle at first, but obvious in hindsight. Jacob's promos in MLW started to shift. He talked less about his family name and more about carving his own legacy. He stopped wearing the traditional family colors. He stopped referencing the dynasty. He started talking like a man who was shedding a skin. Drew, meanwhile, began wrestling like he had nothing left to lose. He didn't just want to beat his opponents, he wanted to brutalize them. It was psychological warfare. Win or lose, he left people hurting. And if you watched closely, you saw him watching Fatu's rise on the outside. In one backstage segment months ago, Drew walked past a locker that had Fatu scrawled on the nameplate. He paused for half a second, smirked, and kept walking. At the time, it felt like nothing. Now, it feels like everything. Fan forums started picking up on it. Reddit threads exploded with theories. Some speculated Drew had been talking to Fatu months before their meeting. Others suggested this was the plan all along, to let the Bloodline rebuild, just so they could break it from the inside. And what better time to strike than now? Roman is gone. Jay and Jimmy are distant memories. Solo stands alone, building a kingdom on sand. The rebellion isn't loud. It doesn't need fireworks. It starts with one nod, one quote, one alliance no one saw coming. Jacob Fatu and DREW McIntyre aren't here to reclaim the throne. They're here to flip the table. And Solo Sikoa? He just became public enemy number one. It started with silence. There was no theme music, no pyro, no countdown. Just the quiet hum of electrical boxes and the clatter of rolling cases backstage at a mid-tier SmackDown taping. The kind of night where most people's attention is fixed on the main event, not the shadows behind the curtain. And that's exactly why it happened there. The footage, which leaked just hours later through unauthorized internal surveillance, opened with DREW McIntyre. Not the Scottish warrior in full war paint, but the man himself. Hood up, taping his wrists methodically in a cold corner of the arena's underbelly. Not pacing. Not talking. Just waiting. A few minutes pass. Then, the moment. A heavy door creaks open. A figure enters the frame. Jacob Fatu. He's not wearing ring gear. He's in boots, jeans, and a black Respect First hoodie zipped to the neck. His hands are unwrapped. His expression blank. He walks slowly toward Drew. Not with aggression. Not with caution. With certainty. Drew looks up. And for 7 full seconds, they stare at each other. No words. Just that electric kind of quiet that happens right before a fight, or a pact. Then, Drew gives a small nod. Jacob nods back. A beat. Then Fatu leans forward, just close enough for the mic clipped to the wall to pick it up. I don't fight with family. I fight for respect. And that was it. He turns. Walks out. Drew doesn't move. The internet would call it the Respect Pact. Others would later refer to it as the Hallway Declaration. Whatever the name, it became the moment everything in WWE shifted. And no one, saw it coming. Backstage, chaos. Producers scrambling for statements. Talent standing in clusters, watching the footage loop on their phones in silence. Some shocked. Some smiling. A few even looking worried. The ones who had known Jacob before, especially the Usos, who had history with him off camera, didn't speak to reporters. But sources say one of them smashed a monitor when they saw the footage. The quote, "I don't fight with family. I fight for respect," hit like a loaded shotgun blast through the wrestling world. It wasn't just a soundbite. It was a manifesto. Because in those few words, Fatu had disavowed the core philosophy of the bloodline, loyalty to the name, to the lineage, above all else. It was a direct rejection of Roman's tribal chief doctrine, of Solo's quiet reign, of the hierarchy the family built on reputation. Fatu wasn't just leaving the family. He was denying its authority altogether. And by standing with Drew, an outsider, a former champion who had no ties to the Anoa'i heritage, he was declaring a new order. One built not on blood, but on shared scars. Drew didn't speak that night. He didn't post on X. He didn't issue a statement. He didn't need to. Because silence, when timed right, says more than any promo. As the footage hit social media, WWE fans around the world lit up like wildfire. One clip of the backstage exchange got 12 million views in under 4 hours. A single tweet, just the quote with no context, got retweeted 60,000 times by midnight. YouTubers launched live reaction streams with thumbnails reading "WTF just happened" and "Drew plus Fatu equals Death Squad." Reddit threads popped up so fast the mods couldn't keep up. Speculation ran wild. Were they forming a faction? Was this a one-night tease? Was this a full-blown bloodline civil war? Some fans were emotional. Others skeptical. And a few went deep into fantasy booking mode, predicting a 6-man tag featuring Drew, Fatu, and a mystery third man versus Solo and the Tongans. There were theories that Heyman was behind it. That TripleH greenlit it to shake things up before SummerSlam. That Roman was about to return and reclaim his spot. But none of that was confirmed. Because the best part about the moment was how real it felt. There was no music cue. No backstage interviewer gasping. No setup. Just two men. Quiet recognition. A shared wound. And the kind of tension that you can't fake, even in pro wrestling. Paul Heyman reacts 2 days later. On an exclusive digital segment for WWE.com, Paul Heyman sat down for a short, unscripted interview. Just him, a chair, and a question from an off-screen producer. What's your reaction to Jacob Fatu's quote and alliance with Drew McIntyre? Heyman didn't blink. He folded his hands in front of him. Looked off to the side for a moment, as if trying to measure how much truth he wanted to spill. Then he leaned forward and whispered, Jacob Fatu is not the problem. Respect is. The interviewer asked him to elaborate. Heyman continued, voice low and deliberate. You have to understand something. The bloodline isn't just a group. It's a belief system. It's a hierarchy built on legacy and dominance. When someone walks away, that's betrayal. But when someone walks away and says, I want respect over family, that's heresy. That's dangerous. That's revolutionary. He paused. And you put that kind of energy next to a man like Drew McIntyre? A man who was chosen, forgotten, and forced to rebuild himself from ashes? Another pause. You don't get a faction from that. You get a crusade. The clip ended without music. Just a fade to black. And with that, the signal was clear, this wasn't just a feud. This was an ideological war. Behind the curtain, everything changed. Word from insiders was that Solo Sikoa immediately called a private meeting with Bloodline members, on camera and off. Not to threaten, but to realign. Because for the first time since Roman took the crown, the Bloodline wasn't chasing challengers. They were being hunted. Backstage morale shifted, too. Wrestlers began asking where allegiances stood. Who was with Solo? Who might flip? Was there a third side forming? Some talents started keeping their distance. Others quietly voiced support for Drew and Fatu, especially those who'd felt overlooked, misused, or discarded by the company. This wasn't about titles anymore. This was about identity. And for WWE, it was the kind of real tension you can't script, but can definitely exploit. Over the next 72 hours, fan speculation evolved from knee-jerk shock to deeply layered theorizing. This wasn't just a moment anymore, it was the start of something massive, and everyone knew it. Wrestling Twitter became a war room. Reddit's r/squared circle turned into a hive of digital espionage. Some fans believed the alliance had been in motion since WrestleMania. One post, which quickly gained traction, pointed out that Drew McIntyre's losing streak earlier in the year seemed oddly intentional, like he was being pulled back, grounded, humbled, preparing to link up with someone who didn't care about win-loss records, but about purpose. Others dug up an old podcast where Fatu said, "There's only one guy on that roster I respect who's not family. That man's been through fire and still swinging." He didn't say the name, but everyone now assumed he meant Drew. Another theory suggested that this wasn't the formation of a tag team, but the beginning of a movement. Not a group like the Shield. Something more ideological. The anti-Bloodline. A handful of fans even posted mock-up graphics. Respect over blood. Fatu x McIntyre equals Dominion. The Wolves of War. Hashtags trended worldwide. Hashtag Bloodline cracks. Hashtag Fatu Andrew. Hashtag Respect Warriors. This wasn't a casual team-up. This was the start of a cultural shift within WWE. And fans could feel it. Internally, WWE officials were split. Some viewed the reaction as lightning in a bottle. Organic heat. A storyline that broke the algorithm and woke up a post-Mania lull. These voices pushed to ride the wave, more promos, more footage, more surprise appearances. Others were worried. The Bloodline had been WWE's crown jewel for over 3 years. It was a carefully controlled, prestige-laced legacy arc, letting it implode from the outside. Especially from someone the company once deemed too unstable to sign, felt like playing with fire. But the numbers were undeniable. Social engagement quadrupled. Fatu's name spiked in Google Trends. Drew's merch, previously plateaued, saw a 130% surge. So the decision came down from above: let them roll. Let the war build. Backstage, the mood was less optimistic. Younger talent, those who'd come up through NXT, watched the Bloodline dominate from the shadows. Now felt opportunity and fear simultaneously. One anonymous wrestler was quoted saying, "Fatu and Drew together? That's chaos. That's two guys who don't care about making friends. They're not here to climb. They're here to burn the ladder down." Even veterans kept their distance. Reports indicated that multiple tag teams requested changes to match layouts involving Solo's faction, citing unpredictability. There was one group, however, that watched the alliance form with interest. The silent middle tier. Guys who'd been in catering too long. The workhorses. The overlooked. They saw what this alliance represented: a possible reset. A chance to side with men who weren't playing the corporate game. It wasn't just a fight over titles anymore. It was a fight over identity. A week later, a second clip leaked. This time, it wasn't security footage. It was handheld. Grainy. Shaky. Drew and Fatu were seen sitting together in an empty locker room post-show. No gear. No talking. Just exhaustion. Their bags at their feet. But it's what happened next that sparked new speculation. Fatu reached into his bag and pulled out a chain, thick, silver, with a black dog tag attached. He handed it to Drew without saying a word. Drew looked at it. Nodded once. Hung it around his neck. No logo. No words. Just a symbol. It was tribal, but not Samoan. More warborn. Like something etched by hand, not factory. The symbolism wasn't lost on fans. This wasn't the start of a stable. It was the start of a creed. The next SmackDown featured a subtle but noticeable shift in commentary. Michael Cole tried to keep things neutral, but Booker T, now a semi-regular on the desk, went off script. "This is bigger than people realize," he said. "Jacob Fatu ain't just teaming up. He's redefining what loyalty means around here." Corey Graves, always the company loyalist, pushed back. "You don't spit on your family to earn respect, Book." To which Booker replied, Maybe if your family turned their back on you first, you would. That one line lit the internet up. Because it touched a nerve. The story wasn't being told like a regular rivalry. It was unfolding like a documentary. Every segment. Every moment. Every interview felt real. Let's pause here. What's actually happening? This is not about a heel turn. It's not about a big reveal. This is two outsiders finally finding each other after being systematically pushed out, let down, or forgotten by a system that rewards bloodlines and betrays effort. Jacob Fatu isn't rejecting his family out of spite. He's doing it because the family rejected him first. Drew isn't bitter because he didn't get his moment. He's bitter because when he finally did, no one was there to celebrate it. Their pain isn't manufactured. It's baked into the story. That's what fans are connecting to. That's why this alliance feels different. It's not fantasy booking. It's inevitable storytelling. Two men with nothing left to prove, but everything left to say. And just like that, it begins. WWE doesn't put them on TV immediately. They let them stew in the minds of the fans. Let the rumors circulate. Let Solo sweat. Fatu posts cryptic clips on Instagram, short videos of cities burning, wolves hunting, and a single line, "Respect is earned in silence. Paid for in blood." Drew posts a photo with no caption, just his boots resting beside a pair of Fatus, laced up and ready. No matches. No confrontations. Just tension. The kind that you can feel even when the show goes off air. Because this isn't a feud. It's not even a rebellion. It's the start of a reckoning. And Solo Sikoa? He just became the face of the system. And they're coming to tear it down. Jacob Fatu doesn't cut traditional promos. He doesn't talk for pop. He doesn't pause for crowd chants. He speaks like someone who never expected a microphone in his hand and doesn't care if you understand him. So when WWE aired a pre-taped, no-frills vignette of Fatu walking through the alleyways of Oakland, hood up, voice low, no music underneath, fans listened. He didn't shout. He didn't pace. He just spoke into the camera like it was someone who owed him money. "I was born into royalty," he said. "But nobody ever told me what that meant." He paused. "They told me I had to be grateful. That I was lucky to be in the family. But when I got locked up, where were they? When I got clean, who showed up? Nobody. Not Roman. Not Jimmy. Not Jay. You know who came? My own hands." He held them up. "These hands. They fed me. They trained me. They bled for me." Then he turned and pointed to the street behind him. "You see that? That's where I learned how to survive. Not in the gym. Not at family dinners. Not backstage. Right there. Concrete floors and broken glass. That's where I earned my respect." He stepped closer to the lens. "And now Solo Sikoa wants to tell me I abandoned the family? Nah. I was never invited to the table. So now I'm flipping it." End of segment. No graphics. No logo. Just his eyes staring down the camera. In that moment, every fan who had followed Fatu's journey, who saw him claw through the independents while the rest of his family took corporate jets, understood one thing: this wasn't a turn. This was a statement. Fatu didn't reject his family. He outgrew it. Drew McIntyre's arc isn't about revenge anymore. It's about rewriting what kind of man he wants to be, because the one he used to be almost broke him. When WWE brought him back after his run through the Indies, they gave him a second chance. He took it. He played by the rules. He trained harder than anyone. He became world champion in a time when no one else wanted to carry the weight. But what did it earn him? A title run in silence. Applause from empty seats. No WrestleMania moment. No crowd surfing victory lap. Just quiet respect, and then, nothing. No follow-up push. No payoff. They handed the main event scene to others. New faces. Safer bets. And Drew stood there, watching the machine pass him by again. The turning point came in an untelevised match overseas. After the bout, Drew reportedly sat backstage for 2 hours in full gear, not speaking to anyone. Later that week, he started training in silence. No cameras. No social media. Just iron and sweat. Reports say he stopped answering PR calls. Turned down interviews. Showed up late to production meetings, and left early. Then came the matches where he stopped selling. Stopped smiling. Started kicking harder. Landing claymores with real torque. Hurting people. One backstage producer said he wasn't trying to win. He was trying to prove something. That we forgot who the hell he is. When Drew aligned with Fatu, fans called it a heel turn. It wasn't. It was a reset. He's not playing a character anymore. He's a man rewriting his code, one punch at a time. Solo Sikoa has never been a talker. His silence was once his strength. It made him feel inevitable, like a tidal wave that never announced its approach. But now that silence is starting to crack. Since Fatu and Drew joined forces, Solo's reactions have grown colder. Not louder, just more distant. He stopped making eye contact backstage. Wrestlers reported that even his allies felt like they were talking to a ghost. In meetings, he doesn't speak unless spoken to. His face never changes. He trains alone. Eats alone. And when he enters arenas now, he doesn't look at the crowd. He scans for threats. He's not a leader anymore. He's a man defending his throne with no idea who's still loyal. The isolation wasn't immediate, it crept in. First, Fatu said no. Then Drew declared war. Then the locker room started going silent when he walked in. Even Paul Heyman, once glued to Roman's hip, has started keeping distance. Solo is now everything Roman never wanted to become, alone, in a faction meant to be built on brotherhood. The name Bloodline used to mean legacy. Now it means pressure. And pressure breaks everything eventually. Fatu and Drew aren't friends. They don't pose together. Don't crack jokes. Don't cut tag team promos with cheesy one-liners. They're brothers in war. Their partnership isn't based on chemistry. It's based on understanding. In a leaked backstage photo, they're seen sitting on separate benches post-match. Both drenched in sweat. Not speaking. Just breathing. That image went viral, not because it was dramatic, but because it was real. You could feel it, two men who didn't need to talk to know they had each other's back. They share a bond forged in betrayal, not in kayfabe, but in lived history. Both were cast aside at different times. Both came back harder. Both know what it feels like to be the strongest man in the room and still be treated like a problem. That kind of pain doesn't create a team. It creates a weapon. They don't hug. They don't high-five. They nod. They bleed. They break things. Because they're not fighting for gold. They're fighting to remind everyone who watched them fall that they should have never been underestimated. WWE didn't announce it. No banner, no promo, no hype package. But everyone knew. War had begun. The first public blow was struck on the July 4th edition of SmackDown. Solo Sikoa was mid-promo, rare for him. He stood in the ring under a single spotlight, dressed in all black, eyes locked on the hard cam. He wasn't holding the mic like a wrestler. He gripped it like a weapon. They think this is a rebellion, Solo said. This is survival. Then he turned. Boom. Jacob Fatu came out of nowhere and speared him so violently the rope snapped. Literally snapped. The top rope whipped off the turnbuckle and coiled onto the mat. Referees sprinted down the ramp. Fans stood frozen. There was no music. No warning. No smile on Fatu's face. Just fury. Then Drew appeared. No entrance. No theatrics. He came through the crowd like a riot cop. Claymore to Tama Tonga outside the ring. Superkick to Hikuleo. They cleared the ring in under 2 minutes. No words spoken. Just destruction. And then, just as suddenly as they appeared, they exited. Back through the crowd. No taunts. No mic drops. No smiles. It was surgical. That night, WWE cut to commercial with no commentary. Even the production crew didn't know what to say. Because the storyline was no longer a storyline. It was a campaign. Within 24 hours, WWE had to issue an official statement. In light of recent unprovoked attacks by Jacob Fatu and DREW McIntyre, WWE management is evaluating disciplinary actions and reviewing future match card considerations. Translation: the fans are eating this alive, so we need to bring it into the storyline fast. By the next Monday Night Raw, Adam Pearce stood in the center of the ring and made it official. You want war? You got it. SummerSlam. Drew McIntyre and Jacob Fatu vs. Solo Sikoa and a partner of his choosing. The crowd erupted. But then Pearce added the twist: this isn't just a match. This is no disqualification. No count-out. One fall to a finish. And whoever wins walks away with complete authority over Friday Night SmackDown. Fans lost it. This wasn't just personal anymore. Now it was political. Power. Control. Broadcast dominance. The rebellion had just been given stakes. WWE aired dual promos the following week. Fatu and Drew were shown in a rundown gym on the west side of Chicago. No lights. Just cinderblock walls, iron bars, and old-school mats that looked like they hadn't been cleaned in years. Fatu was flipping tires, slamming them with a sledgehammer between reps. Drew was doing squats with chains draped over his shoulders, grunting through bloodied lips. No music. No narration. Just sweat, metal, and rage. Drew finally looked at the camera and said, "We're not training for a match. We're preparing for war." Then the shot cut to Solo in a dark ring with Tama Tonga and Hikuleo. No words. Just sparring. Repeated counters. Precision attacks. Solo moved differently now. Tighter. Focused. He didn't smile. Didn't pose. He looked like a man trying to predict the unpredictable. Because for the first time since the Bloodline's rise, he was facing something he didn't know how to control. A threat that wouldn't be intimidated. Just days before the go-home episode of SmackDown, WWE cameras captured a segment that wasn't aired, but was leaked intentionally. Backstage, Tama Tonga and Hikuleo were seen arguing with Solo. Tama was shouting, "You brought this on us. You let Fatu walk. You didn't lock it down." Solo, as always, didn't shout back. He just stared. Then Tama said it. "Roman never would have let this happen." And that did it. Solo lunged. The three brawled against a concrete wall before agents separated them. Next day, Tama and Hikuleo were pulled from the match. WWE made its storyline official: Solo would now have to pick a new partner. Or fight alone. The bloodline was cracked. Not just in the storyline, but visibly, narratively, emotionally. Solo had no backup. And the world was watching. The final SmackDown before SummerSlam didn't open with pyro or music. It opened with Drew and Fatu standing in the ring. Not behind the announce table. Not ambushing from behind. Dead center. Facing the camera. Fatu spoke first. "We don't want your belts. We don't want your contracts. We want your pride." Then Drew stepped forward. "You built your legacy on silence and fear. But guess what, Solo? We ain't scared. And silence only works when nobody's screaming back. That's when Solo's music hit. He didn't walk fast. He didn't flinch. He walked to the ring like a man walking into his own funeral, but ready to make someone else die first. Face to face, DREW and Solo stared each other down. But it was Fatu who stepped forward and said the line that cracked the internet. "This ain't your house anymore, yus." Then he headbutted Solo without warning. Another brawl. Chairs. Tables. Security flooded the ring. SmackDown ended with bodies strewn across the floor and referees screaming. No winner. No stand tall moment. Just raw chaos. The final image? Fatu and DREW walking backward up the ramp, fists clenched, staring down a bloodied Solo crawling toward the ropes. Black screen. SummerSlam logo fades in. No words. Just 3 silhouettes. And the war to come. WWE's production team went all in. In the final week leading up to SummerSlam, they aired a full cinematic package titled, Respect Over Blood. It opened in black and white. Split screen. On one side, Jacob Fatu, bare-knuckle punching a tree until his knuckles bled. On the other, DREW McIntyre dragging a weighted sled across gravel in the Scottish Highlands. Then a voiceover kicked in. Not from either of them, but from Paul Heyman. You can't reason with the forgotten. You can't threaten the discarded. When men are no longer afraid of losing anything, they become something worse. Cut to Solo Sikoa, watching clips of Roman, standing alone in a ring, wrapping his wrists. Then Heyman's voice again, they become believers in destruction. Fast cuts. Chairs breaking. Glass shattering. Blood dripping down DREW's face. Fatu leaping off barricades like a missile. Solo choking out an opponent while staring into the camera. Final line, SummerSlam isn't the end of the story. It's the beginning of the fallout. The crowd reaction after that promo? Nuclear. Because it didn't feel like a match promo. It felt like a eulogy. With Solo's partner still unannounced, fan theories flooded every corner of the internet. Some believed Roman would return at the last second. Others guessed a wild card, Braun Breaker, a returning Jimmy Uso, or even Brock Lesnar. One theory suggested Solo would fight alone, embracing martyrdom to preserve what little pride he had left. But there was one name that sent shockwaves when it started trending, The Rock. A few cryptic social media posts and out-of-context teases led fans to wonder if this entire war was a setup for a WrestleMania-level family implosion, The Rock as the last tribal authority stepping in to settle a blood feud gone nuclear. WWE stayed silent. No confirmations. No denials. Just one tweet from the official account, Solo has until the bell to choose. Or go alone. Retweets exploded. Everyone had an opinion. Everyone had a theory. But no one had the answer. And that uncertainty added fuel to the fire. 3 days before SummerSlam, WWE dropped the final trailer. Only one line appeared on screen, winner controls SmackDown. This wasn't symbolic anymore. Whoever won the match would gain storyline control over the entire brand. Draft picks. Match cards. Creative autonomy. Fatu and DREW weren't just fighting for revenge, they were trying to take the throne and tear down the structure that kept them out for so long. The stakes were historic. Never before had a tag match carried this much weight. This wasn't just about the bloodline. It was about reshaping the entire company. The question wasn't who's better. It was who decides what happens next. In the end, it was never just about Jacob Fatu and DREW McIntyre versus Solo Sikoa. It was about identity. Fatu was the ghost of the bloodline, the one they didn't invite, didn't mention, didn't acknowledge. He wasn't ignored because he wasn't good enough. He was ignored because he couldn't be controlled. DREW was the company's forgotten champion, once handpicked, later discarded, then used as a placeholder when things got rough. He gave WWE his best years. And when the smoke cleared, they moved on. These were two men who carried bitterness in their bones. Not self-pity. Not jealousy. Bitterness rooted in truth. They were never the chosen ones. They weren't handed titles, TV time, or the torch. So they stopped asking for it. They built their own fire. And when they struck, against Solo, against the Bloodline, against the system, they didn't miss. Whether they win or lose at SummerSlam is almost irrelevant. The message has already landed. The system is broken. The throne is vulnerable. And now, everyone in the locker room knows it. If you've been following this war from the beginning, you know what's at stake. This isn't about tribal chants or steel chair spots. This is about who WWE belongs to next. Is it still the era of Dynasty? Or does it belong to the fighters who weren't supposed to make it? You've seen the footage. You've heard the stories. You felt the tremors every time Drew and Fatu stepped into the frame. Now it's your turn. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Who do you believe should take control of SmackDown? Are you still loyal to the Bloodline? Or do you believe in the assassins of loyalty? Hit like if this story grabbed you. Subscribe if you want front row seats to what happens next. Because trust us, when this war ends, something else will begin. Let's rewind, just for a second. Back to that moment. Backstage hallway. No lights. No music. No script. Drew McIntyre. Jacob Fatu. One nod. One line. I don't fight with family. I fight for respect. That was the spark. Everything since then, the attacks, the promos, the betrayals, the chaos, it all leads back to that 7-second interaction. Two men who looked each other in the eye and saw the same story written in different scars. They didn't bond over blood. They bonded over pain. And together? They rewrote the rules. This wasn't supposed to happen. But it did. And WWE will never be the same again. The night before SummerSlam, WWE posted one last promo. No warning. No graphic. Just a black screen. Then the sound of boots on concrete. Then Drew's voice, "You thought this was about revenge?" Then Fatu's voice. "This is about taking back what was never offered." Then silence. Fade in the SummerSlam logo. Then it burns away. Final frame, respect. Or blood. Fade to black. The match hasn't even started, and yet the effects of this war are already shaking the foundation of WWE in real time. Backstage morale has shifted. Quietly, new alliances are forming. Not on camera, not in front of fans, yet. But whispers are growing louder in the locker room. Names who felt sidelined, who've coasted on potential or been overlooked, are now watching Fatu and Drew with different eyes. Because they've done the one thing no one has ever done successfully, they made the system blink. Not Roman. Not Seth. Not Cody. Not The Rock. Fatu and Drew forced the machine to flinch. They did it without legacy clout. Without management's blessing. Without ceremonial returns or crowd-pandering speeches. They didn't ride a wave. They made the storm. In a rare off-camera sit-down released as a digital exclusive, Paul Heyman sat in his office chair, eyes sunken, lips pursed, arms folded. He didn't speak for the first 30 seconds. Just stared off camera, rubbing his forehead. Then, finally, Roman Reigns built a kingdom. It was feared. Respected. Predictable. Not because it was weak, but because everyone knew the rules. He paused again. Then looked into the lens. Jacob Fatu just tore up the rulebook. Another pause. And Drew McIntyre handed him the matches. He leaned forward. Do you know how dangerous a war becomes when the enemy doesn't care about what happens to them? You can't outmaneuver it. You can't outlast it. You just try to survive it. He ended with a whisper. And if I'm Solo Sikoa? I'm not sure survival's on the table. The screen cut to black. No branding. No sound. Just Paul Heyman's face. Stone cold. The Bloodline was once unshakable. They ruled SmackDown with ritual and rhythm. Acknowledge the tribal chief. Fall in line. Know your role. That era is gone. Now? One by one, the pillars are crumbling. Roman is absent. Jimmy is lost. Jay is disillusioned. Tama Tonga and Hikuleo are fractured. Solo is isolated. And Paul Heyman? He's quiet. Too quiet. And standing in the middle of the ruins? Fatu. The one they said was too dangerous to include. And now? The only one willing to finish what they all started. But not for glory. For respect. Let's not ignore one thing. Drew McIntyre is a chess player disguised as a sledgehammer. For years, he bled for the company. Carried it during the pandemic. Delivered killer matches. Took no shortcuts. And for what? To be cast aside the moment the crowds came back. When Cody returned, the hype shifted. When Roman reigned, Drew was put on hold. When titles were unified, he became expendable. And still, he waited. Until he stopped. Drew's alignment with Fatu isn't just emotional. It's strategic. He chose the one man the company feared. The one man with nothing to lose and everything to say. Together, they aren't fighting to earn the spotlight. They're dragging it toward them. No sword. No speeches. No chosen one drama. Just fists. Just truth. Just pain rebranded into power. What if they win? This is the question that haunts every storyline analyst and WWE decision-maker alike. What happens if Drew and Fatu win? What happens if the Wolves take control of the house? They've already torn down the Bloodline's curtain. They've already shaken management's grip. They've got the fans. The chaos. The momentum. So what's next? Do they reshape SmackDown into a battleground where merit trumps legacy? Do they turn the lights off on the corporate throne room? Or do they burn it down and let someone else rise from the ashes? This isn't just booking speculation. This is narrative destabilization. And everyone, from the mid-card to the top, is wondering if these two win. Who's next? Because they won't just hold power. They'll become the new standard. And what if they lose? Even more terrifying, what if they don't win? What if Solo Sikoa, against all odds, finds a partner, stands tall, and beats them? That's worse. Because then they've lost everything. No more credibility. No more chaos. No more movement. If Fatu and Drew lose at SummerSlam, the machine swallows them again. The rebellion gets squashed. The gate slams shut harder than ever. And you know what? That makes them even more dangerous. Because if they're going to die in this war, they're going to take something with them. Maybe Solo. Maybe the myth of Bloodline invincibility. Maybe the whole damn blueprint of what WWE thinks a star is supposed to be. And that's what makes this match bigger than gold. Bigger than ego. This is legacy versus legitimacy. As SummerSlam inches closer, the tension isn't being manufactured anymore. It's real. The locker room is split. The fans are divided. The power balance is on a knife's edge. And at the center of it, for words still ring louder than any promo, I fight for respect. That quote will be remembered. Long after the match. Long after the war. Because it's not just Jacob Fatu's mission statement. It's every underdog scream. It's every overlooked warrior's anthem. And this Saturday? That scream echoes inside the ring.